Hello. Welcome to another episode of Season 16 of the Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, the theme is B movies for C students. We're taking a break from the current trends toward elevated horror and examining the history of horror B movies and how they've developed over time. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. We got some things to discuss on this episode.
Uh-oh.
I got a little reflective.
Oh.
And I feel like there's an important conversation that needs to happen that we probably should have been having the whole season.
Okay.
But I'll get into that in just a minute.
Okay.
The theme of this season is B movies for C students. We are doing a year-by-year, or decade-by-decade, I guess, examination of B horror movies over time, starting in the 1930s, going through the 2020s. This week is our first movie of the 1970s. And this is our first chance in a long time to talk about filmmaker David Cronenberg.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Canadian who is often credited as being the father of body horror. And so longtime listeners will probably remember his name from when we did our episode on The Fly from 1986, which I think of as probably the most quintessential example of body horror. I feel like that's the one that everybody can kind of point to and be like, oh, I know what that means now.
Did he also do Kronos or something? What am I thinking? What was
Are you thinking
thing?
Crimes of the Future?
No. Yeah, we'll move on. Sorry.
No worries. The first movie he directed was Stereo in 1969, and it was made on a budget of $8,000. And then his third film, Shivers, in 1975, made $5 million on only a $180,000 budget. And I was really on the fence about what movie to pick between Shivers and this one, which is The Brood from 1979. And since I said this one, it's pretty obvious which one we chose.
Damn, the suspense is killing me.
Yeah. The Brood has showed up on a lot of lists of movies we've looked at when preparing for other seasons over the years. And it's somewhat highly regarded, like more so now even than it was at the time for a lot of reasons. And I wanted to go with The Brood because I feel like what kicked off this whole season was thinking about how elevated horror in 2024 is like a big deal. And people talk about, oh yes, our horror is so much better than the horror of the past. And, you know, it has societal commentary and it has creativity and explores human psychology and on and on. But like, I maintain horror movies have always been doing all of those things. And to say that, you know, the rest of horror is unelevated is kind of silly. And I thought, well, this movie is like well regarded. It's technically a B movie, and we should talk about it just as sort of like a comparison. But then I watched it and I started taking notes, and then I was reading about his previous movies, and I was like, I feel like as we've gone through this season, I'm less confident on what B movie even means.
I don't think anyone does.
Because I feel like the definition was really straightforward in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Because it was the B movie that was made to be shown with the A movie in the theaters that Hollywood owned. And so they made a cheap movie to put along with it so they could call it a double feature and say that it was a 2-for-1 ticket when really you were buying a ticket to one high budget movie and then getting an add-on for free that didn't cost much to make. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of outsourced that B movie making to other lower budget production houses just so that they didn't have to do it themselves. And then we got into kind of this age of independent movies where people were getting money from Baptist churches or, random other sources to kind of make these one-offs, or coming up with their own advertising to make money, or stealing someone else's advertising for their movie to make money. But then we get to 1979, and this is like a somewhat well-made, well-regarded movie, and it was sponsored by the Canadian government. More on that later.
Yeah.
But the question is, so what does B-movie even mean at this point?
Well, did technically, is the term B-movies just an excuse for, I mean, ever since the whole purpose, son of a bitch, I've knocked like 10 things off my desk. The whole purpose of, like you're saying with B-movies, was, you get a better deal out of it during the Great Depression, all that. Once that Great Depression ended, did we have to make those deals anymore? Or once the government was like, yo, you can't own theaters anymore, production companies, you got to sell them. Is that when? And now we're just like reviewing cheaply made movies with less A stars than normal? If so, I'm down for it. I'm just saying.
Well, I kind of feel like...
Well, they're not necessity at this point.
If we wanted to be purists about it, we could say that B-movies are movies made outside of Hollywood. But I think if you say B-movie, like B-horror movie, to the average person, they have certain other connotations for that movie. I think that B-movie in most people's head means that it is a horror movie that is made outside the Hollywood system, that is low budget, low quality, and appealing to maybe the more base tastes. But I don't think that's true, but I'm a little bit confused as to like where to go moving forward. Like, do we just kind of keep doing a variety? Do we want to like really double down on the things that help contribute to the stereotype, or do we want to do things that break the stereotype, or where do we go from there? So I just wanted to throw that out as a thing that we should be thinking about as we move through the rest of the movies this season. But regardless, we both watched The Brood, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So yeah, this movie was written and directed by David Cronenberg, but the producers were kind of an interesting story. Les Productions Mutuelles Ltd. That's my phonetic pronunciation of some French words.
That sounded great.
And Elgin International Productions produced the film as The Brood Films. And it was shot in Toronto in about a month and a half, or a month and a week, in 1978 on a budget of 1.4 million Canadian dollars, with 200,000 of those Canadian dollars coming from the Canadian Film Development Corporation. One of the actors recalled the production crew being very small, with only around 7 crew members in total, and many of them were academics and PhDs standing there holding lights. The actresses' scenes were shot over a period of 3 days. To portray the brood of children, Cronenberg cast a group of child gymnasts from Toronto. So that's interesting to me because this obviously was not like a super professional crew, if that makes sense. I mean, it sounds like he was basically doing some fundraising and exploring different ways of getting money to put together to do this. And this, I think, was his like 6th movie. And he managed to get money from the Canadian government, which is, I guess, a little more legit than getting it from a Baptist church. Like, he didn't have to get baptized. But I've always heard that in Canada, they have like funding set aside for artistic things. And so I looked a little bit into Telefilm Canada, which is where the money came from, apparently. And it is a corporation that reports to Canada's federal government through the Minister of Canadian Heritage. And it provides services to the Canadian audiovisual industry with regional offices kind of spread out across Canada. And the primary mandate of the corporation is to finance and promote Canadian producers through its various funds and programs. So they've got like a whole branch of the government whose job is just to help fund Canadian movies.
This movie is probably the reason why America doesn't support arts. I'm just kidding.
Well,
I just couldn't. I mean, it's amazing. This whole thing is just kind of blowing my mind. First off, I didn't know it about the Canada thing. But it's tripping me out because now I'm just wondering, like, when it came out, everyone in Canada was like, yo, we got to go support our own.
Or do you think they were like, your tax dollars at work?
Actually, I bet that was more the case.
Well, I'll tell you who definitely did not care for this movie.
Who?
And that is David Cronenberg's ex-wife.
Yeah. Yeah, I read about that.
So apparently he wrote this movie after his own, like, very nasty divorce. And so the whole premise was to, I guess, sort of tell the story of, like, how it feels to go through that situation. And he even tried to cast an actor and actress that looked like him and his ex-wife in the film. And so at first I was like, okay, that's going to be interesting. And then the movie starts and she was not portrayed in a particularly positive light, we'll say. But that is one reason that this movie, I think, has gotten more critical acclaim over time, is just sort of like the allegorical nature of it and sort of the way he was embodying some of the concepts and what the movie was like really about underneath all of the imagery and symbolism. And I think that is all exactly the way people talk about elevated horror movies now. So I just want to go back to that to say, call it elevated horror in 2024, but horror has always been doing the same things.
Yeah, you never mind. I'm not happy about this.
Okay. Well,
I had to Google allegorical.
Sorry, my bad. I'll tone it down.
But I get what it means now. I don't know. Here's the other thing that why I was kind of chopped up there for a second, because when you said the meaning, which I read about the divorce thing, but now I'm wondering what the actual meaning of this film is, other than just to piss me off.
Well, I look forward to talking to you about that more.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done it. Yeah.
But right now, I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to get into the... If I ever get divorced and the Canadians give me $200,000 to make a movie about it, it will be much meaner to my ex than this was. Details.
I thought you were going to say the broad details.
Opportunity missed.
Dude, that's all I ever think about when opportunity missed is said.
In 1979, New World Pictures brought us The Brood, a psychological body horror movie written and directed by David Cronenberg. This movie tells the story of a dad named Frank who is trying to protect his daughter from her unstable mother in the midst of a series of bizarre murders. This movie was made on a budget of 1.4 million Canadian dollars and made about $5 million at the box office. It can currently be streamed on Max. The first line I had in my notes was, funny that this was a story inspired by Cronenberg's own divorce, and the movie opens with a dad dedicated to taking care of his daughter and a mom in an asylum who's putting her in danger.
I don't get the hidden meaning behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy. Yeah. But also, like, he had to get that news out there. I mean, shit. Otherwise, they could just speculate it. Oh, he's going through a divorce. That's why he made it. But he had to confirm it. That's his fault. Leave it up to mystery. Everything I was reading about this, people were complaining about the portrayal of some of the characters, and it's like, but it's just a fucking fucking movie. Like, it's just a movie.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it also was legitimately trying to make some commentary on like generational trauma and how the way that your parents are messed up is kind of the way that you're messed up is kind of the way that you'll mess up your kids if you're not very deliberate about breaking that cycle. And so I think that's looking through that.
I think if it wanted to do that, though, it would show like what Candy was like when she got older. I think this movie is just Cronenberg just being like, "Hey, I want to gross out Bryce this in 100 years from now because I was grossed out from the body shit." That's what I think.
I think that he also wanted to spend plenty of time making his ex look bad and like the one who was wrong in the situation. So we couldn't just skate past that.
Is that narcissism?
I don't know.
How crazy do you have to be like, yo, I'm going to do that. Not only am I going to do that, I'm going to do that with $200,000 of your tax money. She paid for this film technically to talk shit about her tape.
Right. Yeah. No, that's amazing. She did.
I'd be even more mad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so this one definitely took a little bit to get going. Like, it was very confusing in the beginning with all of the therapy sessions and figuring out who was being talked about in the different scenes. But it felt like it kind of jumped into place with the early scene where the grandma gets killed. I guess the thing that I noticed was it started off with like the therapists and talking about the mom in the asylum or whatever center. And then there's a lot of talk. Yeah, exactly. That's the proper name. And then it talked a lot about how the police had just found the daughter in bed asleep at the grandma's house. And the psychologist says that she probably saw something that traumatized her and she's in shock or whatever it was. And that's like a common reaction and stuff. And I don't know. It seemed like very early on psychology was a big part of this movie, which is yet another thing that we see tends to be a pretty big part in the movies that we watched last season in the 90s. Like, every movie had a psychologist or, someone who was dealing with some sort of psychological issue. And so it was interesting to me that, 12 years before the 90s, this movie was really focused on that as well.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to tell a story like this, you have to have some sort of like middleman almost, or like a middleman of maybe, I don't know, of the story, which would be the therapist, which might be easier to explain the crazy to the non-crazy to the person watching the film. But it's definitely just...
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like, you have to have something kind of explain what's going on, or else you just be like, well, who's actually the crazy one here? I don't know.
Well, clearly the ex-wife. That was the whole theme of the movie.
That's true. Or was it the husband who was still married? They weren't exes, right? They're not divorced, were they?
No, they weren't.
That's his own damn fault. He's a crazy one. He should have been right in the loony bin with her.
So at first, I thought the daughter was the one who killed the grandma.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it took me a little while to realize, because she was wearing the red coat. And so
I can see that.
Yeah, and so I thought it was going to be like a weird, like, oh, maybe the daughter's the crazy one, or like she has this like dark side that comes out sometimes or something. But yeah, it definitely went a different direction, and it also didn't really seem like super body horror at that point.
No,
but that
I was actually relieved it wasn't. Yeah, I was relieved it wasn't her, not because I liked the character. I was just like, I don't know if I got this. Like, I want to see something else, and sure enough, I got to see something else.
Yeah, and really kind of the first body horror-ish thing that happened in this movie was when he went to see the other, like, former patient of Dr. Ragland, and he had that, like, nasty, gnarly tumor on his neck.
Yeah, that's stupid as hell. I hated it.
I was going to ask how much that bothered you.
It pissed me off. Like, a lot of the times it just kind of like gives me anxiety a little bit. Like at the beginning when Oliver Reed's talking to the, I don't know, that crazy guy, and he has like spots on him. I was like, okay, I can deal with this. And then when that dude showed that ball sack on his fucking throat that was hidden behind that scarf, are you kidding me? I wanted to punch him. I still want to. I'm mad. My fists are clenched right now. I don't know. It angered me so much. I was just like, that's not needed. I don't care. I'm not even scared by this film. I'm just going to turn on the lights real quick.
So in thinking about how you might react to this movie, I was actually glad that we didn't do one of his earlier movies, because I would guess that they're leaning more into that, with that being kind of his quintessential style. So I think we picked correctly on that front. But
I did like The Fly. Like, I felt like The Fly was kind of gross. It's just that thing on the throat. Get out of here.
Well, how did you feel about the other stuff in the movie? So there were like the kind of deformed children that were part of the brood, and then there was obviously the mom when she reveals herself and has the like creatures growing off her and stuff. Was that did those things gross you out more, or did the neck tumor gross you out more?
No, so the kids was fine because like there was enough makeup on to make them look like they weren't human. I think it's the fact that it's a human with that creeps me out. But with the makeup and the features of the kids, I was like, okay, well, they just look like monsters or something. You know, it doesn't affect me. At the end, the mom with the things, stick it out. I think it was so outlandish that it was just like, it doesn't affect me. Like I watched her lick the blood off the baby. I watched all that. That's no problem. Literally, it was the balls on that dude's fucking throat that was hidden behind that turtleneck. Pissed me off. That's it, because it matched the skin tone. I was just like, I'm good. You don't have to show it off, dude. I'm gonna punch you in your tumor, man.
I thought it looked kind of like like coral reef type stuff growing down there or something. It was really disturbing.
By all means, let's just keep describing it. This is the maddest I've ever been at you right now. Dude, that's my phobia. I'd look at 1,000 eyes through the fucking glass if I didn't have to. It's that body shit, and I ain't got it. That's not normal.
Yeah. So we have definitely stumbled into the limits of your enjoyment, because I feel like everybody has like that point that they can't go any further, and we found it for you. So
I'm literally sweating right now, dude. I'm not mad at you per se. No, I'm just kidding.
You're just mad.
No, this is definitely like, because that's like that thing, whatever is like the trypophobia or whatever they call it. That's it. And it's just, you're just like, I don't like this. And I think I just kind of forgot about it since I watched it. And then all the feelings came back, because I literally like I'm sweating right now thinking about it, because it really did piss me off. It is. This is the thing. I'm good. Like, I could see people dying. I could see dogs dying. I could see animals. Like, that sucks, but like, doesn't make me mad. That just fucking sets me off. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Yeah, it really, and that's where like being over the top or being outrageous is kind of one of the characteristics that we've seen happening in horror movies as we've gotten further away from their involvement in the Hollywood world. And so, even though this one was a little bit more serious, it had kind of more mature themes, it was trying to make a deeper point than just go for, like extreme scares. I think that it still was kind of pushing the envelope, especially for the late 70s with these types of visuals and stuff in the movie. And so I'm glad we watched it. And I think that from a overall story perspective, what was trying to be communicated was that because of the mom's issues with her own parents and the way that she was brought up and the danger that she felt and everything else, she has held on to this hatred and anger, and then that is sort of manifesting itself by these children, like weird creature children that she's birthing into the world, that then go out and basically exact her revenge on the people that she focuses her emotions on. So the first person they kill is her mom, then they kill her dad, and then they're going after, her ex-husband, and everybody around her is terrified. And that's kind of the main thing is, the doctor's telling him, well, don't let him out, or don't let her get excited or angry or anything, because then they'll all start to attack. You've got to keep her calm. And then of course it all boils over, and they just go crazy and rip apart the doctor, and then are trying to attack the daughter. And so I think it's pretty obvious what he was trying to say was that his ex's issues were harming their daughter, and he couldn't be a part of it anymore, or something. Like that seemed like to be a recurring thing. But it also didn't really, it seemed like he was saying that the mom kind of had no choice in all of it. It was like she was like a victim to this psychological condition, or the stuff that had kind of been put on her by her upbringing. And yeah, to take like his real life experience and then to turn that into this probably means he wasn't entirely blameless either, as far as like the what is your psychological state discussion goes.
Yeah, and I could see it, and I don't know what all he was going through, and I definitely not picking a side or anything, but like I could see that what you were just saying, because as a parent, like I feel like that's like you do. Oh, it's generational trauma or whatever, they call it, where it's like we can stop that. And that's why I just tell you firsthand from having a kid, there's a huge difference in like the way that parents raised us to how we're raising our kids, or at least a good chunk of us. But one of the stresses you have is like, all you hear is like anything you do is going to just screw this kid up or whatever. And it's, it's both sides. They can inherit, struggles, or they can develop them based off of how you're acting. And so it is like a weird line. And so that I feel in a very happy, committed marriage, like, and I still have that stress. I couldn't imagine that on top of going through just a divorce on itself, but like a divorce, and like obviously sounds like a pretty ugly one, it just had to add to the extra stress. However, the thing I wouldn't do is make a film about it, because it's like,
well, that's probably because the American government wouldn't give you money to.
That's true, but I just go to Southern Baptist and I get the money. But my thought is like, that kid is going to grow up one day, and like any time this movie comes up.
Oh, you mean his actual kid?
Yeah. I mean, like that's a constant reminder of your parents' divorce. Like, I don't know. It just seems kind of strange. Like, I'm sure it was therapeutic for him, but at the same time, like, you're just gonna have to talk about this over and over for the rest of your life, man. Like, is that what you want to relive? But maybe it's therapeutic. Who knows? I mean, but there is a lot of stress with that, and I think a lot about like, oh, I hope I didn't screw up my kid by making him do something or whatever. And it's like, no, you didn't. Like, that's just normal stress, I guess. But I'll tell you what's not normal. This goddamn tumor on the throat.
Right.
I do have to say, I liked Oliver Reed in this. He was the doctor. Oliver Reed was also in The Gladiator. He's more well known for that. Oliver Reed and a couple of his buddies were just crazy actors, and they would just get drunk and like just tough dudes. And I actually remember reading a long time ago about Oliver Reed, about how he he was arrested while filming this because he bet a guy he could run naked to some other place. I don't remember what it was at the time. And he was just like, I can run naked. And it was like super cold when they're filming because I think it was Canada. And he got arrested for it mid-production.
For this movie?
Mm-hmm. During this movie,
nice.
Yeah.
Funded by the Canadian government.
I think he's like
dollars at work. I love it. Yeah. So one last thing I had in my notes on this one was just about the ending. And I think that, as they're kind of driving away and it's all over and kind of set up to be not a happy ending, but a we survived type ending. But then you see the growths kind of start on the daughter's arm. And that really brought home the whole point of the idea of like, okay, yeah, we survived. We got through this. We got away from it. But basically she's been infected or had the same kind of, trauma passed down to her that her mom had. And even though I tried to shield her from it, it's still going to have this lasting impact and stuff. So it's interesting because I think this is the first movie that we've done this season that there was any sort of like subtext or larger message to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of interesting.
Rocket XM was talking about atomic war.
That wasn't subtext. They just literally were talking about it the whole time.
I don't know what subtext means.
But yeah, no, it's all good. I think this one is definitely kind of on the more artsy, thoughtful.
No, you're absolutely right.
Side, and we've talked for a long time about how horror movies fall into one of two camps. It's either to try and shock and scare you and make you feel all the feelings that you run away from all day long, or to tell a story while using horror elements to really drive it home and make the point and pull you in a way that you wouldn't be otherwise. And so this one kind of feels more like the latter of the two, which is, again, kind of the opposite. A lot of stuff we watched so far falls more in the first category this season.
Yeah, I think the ending, like, this is technically not a happy ending. I think even if they didn't have the growth show up on the kid, if that's the ultimate message, is the generational trauma, she's got to deal with that for the rest of her life. That's just a sad deal. So this isn't definitely a happy ending. Kind of is, kind of not. I think that at least from my eyes, this movie had both of those two categories where I was just like pissed because the body, that body horror, but then also like the story itself, there were horror aspects, the kids killing the grandma, or the kid killing the grandma with the meat tenderizer. Even the
murders
kids
were brutal,
gnarly, absolutely gnarly, and I think that so in a way I felt like this kind of did both of those. It definitely sounds like I didn't enjoy this film, I'm sure, which is partially true, but it's just because I got pissed off half the way through and I couldn't get pissed back on. So I didn't know how to get out of that funk. However, that was probably passed down to me through my family's trauma. And so that's why I couldn't do it. So I relate with this film. I think it's a good pick.
Thanks. That's all I got on this one.
Never mind.
So next week we'll be back with something with decidedly fewer neck mushrooms, and I'm excited about it.
Could we be more descriptive of this?
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I'm still pissed off that this is Canadian.
I'm sorry I betrayed you.
I hate this film. That's good.
Well,
You know what my
and
favorite
even
thing about Canada is?
the,
When your dad
you know,
said, "Why do you want to move to Canada?" It's like fucking Jerry. Why do you want to move to Canada? Don't you know that their malls have more submarines than their military? And I had no idea what he was referencing at the time, and I was like, "What?" But he got a kick out of that. I was like 12.
yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah,
That is my childhood in a nutshell.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.